Hey, a few times a week I like to get into the habit of doing figure and portrait studies. And when I do this, I'll usually reference some art books I have from Leyendecker and Rockwell to more painterly illustrators like Dean Cornwell too. The other day I was referencing this amazing Leyendecker book to do a few head studies. I thought it would be fun to show the process of it. And the reason that I like looking through Leindecker's works is because he's so masterful at depicting the structure of the head. You can see there. I've shown the different plane changes and the contours. Also, just color-wise, you can see how he depicts different lighting situations and the chroma that he puts into the shadows and reflected lights there. So it would be great to look for how to handle different lighting sources. Let me show a few more pages here. He was a prominent illustrator during the golden age of American illustration, and he heavily influenced Rockwell too. So in here you can see there's some spreads of all the cover art for the Saturday Evening Post here. And just so much amazing captures of his works here. Here's one, so you can see how he just really builds the structure of the head, and that's why I love looking through this. One of my favorite drawing papers to use when I'm doing figure studies is newsprint with charcoal, because that really flows like butter on the page. It's not very archival though. For pencil on paper, I recently started using this Canson paper. And that's what I use for these drawings here. You can kind of see just the scale of it there. And that's very smooth with the graphite pencil. So for drawing, I like to use this mechanical pencil with HB lead. And also combined with this Blackwing that I chiseled down into this nice flat edge, which creates these broad strokes during dark passages, like in the background or maybe the hair. And you can get very kind of brush-like marks with it, which is what I enjoy doing. Also, of course, this is my favorite tool, the kneaded eraser. You can use it to erase, but also to work up to the lights and mold it so that you can get into tiny areas to soften edges, to create highlights, and just a variety. It's just so versatile. I have this other eraser here, this retractable one, which is a stiffer eraser that you can do for wider places like the hair, the highlights in the hair, when you want a nice hard edge. And that's about it for the tools that I used here. Well, I hope you find it interesting seeing the drawings take shape. And if you enjoy, you can always subscribe to check back later for future drawings and other art-related content. Thanks for watching. Before I begin a head sketch, I'll take a moment and make a few observations and mental notes that I'll use to refer to throughout the whole drawing process. And namely, these are the gesture and overall movement of the figure or portrait, my eye level and horizon line in relation to the figure, and also the direction of the light source. So at the beginning, I'll just use straight and angular lines to keep the drawing simple and general. That way I don't commit to anything just yet while I get a feel for how I want this to all shape on the page. So at the beginning, I'll indicate the top of the head and the bottom of the chin. Then I will break the head down into thirds, and this will give me a guideline to build a portrait from. So from the top of the forehead to the brow level to the bottom of the nose, and then bottom of the nose to the chin. Then I'll think about the horizontal brow width against the length of the brow to the bottom of the chin, and then I'll draw a straight line to where the top of the ear would be from the brow line, and then the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the ear. And just doing that gives you a sort of cube shape to work from. This was Bridgman's approach to drawing the head and indicating all the planes. He would think of the head as a cube. So at this point, I'm not thinking about values or edges, just proportions and measurements. Next, I'll roughly indicate the eye socket, length and width of the nose and mouth. And once I've done that, then I'll shift my thinking more about analyzing the value patterns and the shapes of the shadows. So this is where I'll bring about that mental note that I jotted down from where the light source is originating, and that'll dictate the flow and the path of all the shadow shapes and how they integrate together. In this instance, the light source is shining from the bottom right of the page and illuminating the figure from below. And you can see that, for example, by this nice cast shadow of the nose here. So I will think about the characteristics of shadows and apply that while I'm drawing. For example, we'll see how as the form changes, there will be this dark core shadow, and then as the form moves away from the light here towards the eye and the cheek, you'll see it's a little lighter because of that reflected bounced light. Then as for edges, when the cast shadow first begins from the form, it will have this nice crisp hard edge, and then as it slowly moves away from the form, like along the cheek here, the edge will round out and become softer. Also, I tried to apply that same idea to her right eye. You can see I'll think of the eyelid as an oval shape, and how the form, how the shadow follows the form. And then towards the inside of her eye, the inside corner, we'll see I'll try to apply a hard edge to represent a dark cast shadow there. So on the topic of thinking of values, I'll start working from dark to light. So when I know that something's going to be dark and that I've measured and roughly indicated where it's going to be, I'll just go ahead and work that dark in. So I know that the darkest dark is going to be in the background. So I'll indicate that with just broad, I was about to say brush strokes, but broad pencil strokes with that chiseled black line that I have. And I will indicate the darkest darks in her eyelashes and some of the core shadow there. I had forgotten to mention that throughout the drawing process, I have a habit of making mental plumb lines that run down the page. So for example, in my mind, I'll run a vertical plumb line down the inside corner of her eye and see what other features and where they intersect this plumb line. I'll also do this horizontally across the page as well, and this helps me to continually make tweaks and adjustments to features as I kind of hone in on the drawing. Over time, I've made it a habit and automatized it, so it's one of the best tips I can give on drawing from a live model, or basically just drawing from life in general. I had mentioned earlier that in my toolkit I have a kneaded eraser. Well, I use that to soften edges here and there, such as on her eyelids, and create highlights in the hair. I'll also use this stiff eraser when I want to create a longer, hard-edged highlights, like in the hair area. And here's a second head sketch that I drew with the same lighting from the bottom right corner, illuminating the head from below. At this beginning stage, you can see how I'm only using straight lines to keep the initial process of measuring as simple as I can. I found that when I introduced curved lines too early on, then I tend to get punished for it later. So to me, I've associated curved lines with committing lines, and once I've introduced those to the drawing, it generally means I'm confident on my measurements and structure that I've already developed so far. So one book that I think I had mentioned earlier is called Complete Guide to Drawing from Life by George Bridgman. And in there is a section dedicated to constructing the head. And George Bridgman's technique involves thinking of the body as a series of geometric shapes that occupy space, and to sculpt and construct the forms by thinking of a series of simple shapes but also wedges, and how all the forms interlock together to think of the whole. But I got a lot out of the section dedicated to construction of the head, and he just really makes the head occupy space on the page. When he's constructing it, he's talking about four vital lines that run throughout the head, and if you nail those down, then it offers just a great guideline to build upon. My favorite passage is on the first part, when he's just past the distribution of the masses of the head. So I'll read it here. And he talks about, first, draw an outline of the head, then check to see that it will take but 4 lines. Number 1 line is to be drawn first, number 2 next, 3 and 4 to follow numerically. Number 1 line is drawn down the face, touching the root and base of the nose. Number 2 line from the base of the ear at a right angle to number 1, with no relation to the face as to where this line crosses. Number 3 line is drawn from the cheekbone at its greatest width to the outer border of the chin. Where 2 and 3 intersect, start the 4th line and carry it to the base of the nose. Whether the head is seen from above or below, the features will follow the number 4 line. And just that alone, talking about simplifying the head to those 4 lines, really kind of ingrained in me a good practice and a way to simplify the head. So I definitely recommend this book that I'll probably talk about it later, by George Bridgman. Well, that's some of the ideas and techniques I adhere to while sketching portraits in pencil. I hope you found the time-lapse of my drawings interesting, and I'd be curious to know what other resources some of you use to learn about drawing the figure, portrait, or just drawing in general. I'm always looking for more sources of inspiration and learning about how to improve in both drawing and painting, so please comment below on any thoughts or ideas you have. If you'd like to see more of my refined drawings and paintings, you can find me on social media as Brian Lee Victory. Please subscribe and like the video, that way you can see future tutorials with increased quality as I figure out how to best record and post this art related content. Well, thanks again for watching, and take care.